Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Good Deeds Not Investing podcast. I'm your co-host, Chris Seveney, and today I have a special guest, Joe Kennedy from Flying Moose Investments. Joe, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So what I wanted to do is asked several other investors out there if they wanted to be guests on the show to share their stories. We've done over 100 episodes on our podcast and have had numerous guests, but we also wanted to kind of, bring in some other individuals to talk about their experiences because you can always learn from hearing short stories. So over the next few weeks, you're going to be hearing some stories from some other investors. And today I've got Joe on. So Joe, why don't you introduce yourself? And we got PowerPoint for those who are watching this on YouTube or other channels. Or if you're listening, you can go on to our YouTube channel to download the slides later on.
Great. Well, thanks, Chris. Yeah, name of my company is called the Flying Moose, and I always get the question, where'd you come up with that name? It's kind of a unique, weird name. And when I was looking to set it up, I was wanting something unusual, something kind of memorable that, there's a lot of, ABC Capital or those typical type stuff. And so I wanted something that, hey, I've heard of that one before type thing. And where'd you get the name? And it's pretty simple. My wife is a petite lady, and so when I'm in the kitchen with her and I happen to be in her way while she's trying to cook or whatever, she always calls me a moose, get out of my way, you moose, type thing. And then one of my hobbies is flying. I'm a private pilot, so it just kind of seemed logical to be the Flying Moose. So that's the way I ended up naming the company.
So I'm curious because I'm afraid I hate flying. First off, I'm curious, what type of planes do you fly, and how often do you fly?
Yeah, well, not a lot lately with the coronavirus going on, but I'm a private pilot for single engine planes. So I fly the little ones. We call them the guys that go bust holes in clouds and that kind of stuff, and you fly kind of locally. I don't, it's not like I fly all across the United States all the time. I fly pretty much local to the area, but I just enjoy getting up and, being able to go and see different things, from the air and just kind of having the freedom to do that. So, there's a number of different planes that I fly. Cessna 172 is a pretty common one. It's just a small single engine, and some Piper. I guess the one big thing, one opportunity I had was I happened to have an opportunity to be a co-pilot in a Russian jet fighter. They had an opportunity when I was in Russia to be able to go fly a MiG, and so I guess the accomplishment there was I was able to break the sound barrier flying around in this Russian MiG.
Did you do the Tom Cruise where you inverted and got right above another one?
I didn't. Well, we weren't close to another one, but I did do an inversion. I did do loops, and we had a stall where you just go straight up until the thing stalls, and then it kind of falls back, and then you recover and fly on. And so that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. But the breaking the sound barrier was kind of a non-event, really. All you do is you look at the airspeed indicator and it says, okay, you're now going faster than the speed of sound. Whereas, if you're down on the ground, you hear this type thing, So anyway, it was cool. It was a nice experience, but that's not something I fly every day.
So one other question is, you mentioned about flying local. What is local for you, for all the listeners? Where are you located?
Oh, yeah. I'm based in Houston. So my local is Texas, Louisiana, that kind of stuff.
A small state of Texas. So.
Yeah, the small state. Once we get out of Texas, it's quick to get anywhere else. It's just getting out of Texas is the problem. So, so anyway, that's kind of what I do for fun. Kind of a little bit about me, what I've done, and how I kind of got to where I am today. I spent 20 years in a corporate finance job. The last 5 years of my career in corporate finance, I was a CFO for a joint venture in Russia with a major oil company. And during that time, of course, I was doing personal investments, and I did a lot of investments like a lot of people in stocks and bonds. And over time, I started kind of moving out of those because I don't know, it was, you know, I didn't have a magic crystal ball. You
Mhm.
know, I was like anybody else looking at all the stuff. And so the kind of returns they weren't great. You know, they were okay. And sometimes you lose money, and it was just completely unpredictable. So I started moving out of that into real estate, and I got into some rentals, which wasn't bad. But then I kind of heard about notes, and started investigating about notes and how they worked and all that kind of stuff, and went to some trainings. And you and I even, you know, attended some different events together.
Yep.
And I got really interested in them. And so I actually started investing personally in notes. Um, I'm a little guy in the note world. Um, I guess my philosophy, you know, a lot of the people teach you, hey man, if you want to really make notes, you need to get other people's money in there and put it to work, and you can make some money. And I don't deny that. I mean, a lot of people have done that, and they've done it well. But for me, I guess because I'm a little older, and I just am kind of at that point where if I take anybody else's money, I want to be really confident with my knowledge and understanding of investing before I put anybody else's money at risk. So I've kind of started out doing the stuff, you know, based on my personal investments in order to get that experience and learning, so that then I'm comfortable with bringing somebody else in. And so that's kind of the way I've started, and kind of where I am and where I'm going.
And that's, I mean, that is so critical that I'm glad you mentioned that is, you know, you're using your own funds to buy, to educate yourself because, you know, as we go through this, one of the questions I was going to ask you at the end is, you know, from your education to buying a note, you know, the learning curve of how much you learn from the education versus the actual physical buying, which, you know, for us who've done it, know the answer, but I'd like for you to, you know, answer that later on. And, you know, that's one of the important things is, you know, making sure you know what you're doing before you take someone else's money. And even if you think you know what you're doing, a lot of times you may not. um, so
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad you followed that path.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you said you wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, my first note and my experience. And so I put together a little information. As I've kind of gone down this path, I guess the three biggest challenges that I've found is that, you know, finding good assets to purchase. You know, I've seen a lot of garbage out there that people are selling. And, you know, sometimes it gets very tiring going through all of these things that are just, you know. So it takes a lot of work, and you need to work to try to find people who have some good stuff, build relationships with different people, you know, that really make it beneficial to move forward. You know, the other is, you know, understanding how much you should pay for it. You know, kind of that's key. You pay too much, and you're not going to make very much. And there's
Or
all
nothing.
kinds of things around the corner that you're not expecting that can happen. You know, um, and then the last part is, you know, you find the right service providers, because there are some that are good and some that aren't so good, and some that are expensive and some that, you know, are more reasonably priced, and some can deliver and some really don't deliver so well. So, you know, that's kind of a learning experience that you don't get going to, you know, some of these seminars and different stuff. Is, you know, you either hear it from other investors, or, you know, you learn it yourself that you're not really getting what you're hoping to get from a particular service provider.
Mhm.
So, um,
And these problems that you mentioned are
yeah,
consistent going to be there's. I mean, I'll tell people, you know, I've been doing this, you know, for a short time, you know, but it's still been 4 years, and those are constant problems
yeah.
that you're going to
You
experience.
do not grow them, do you?
No.
uh, so to tell you about my first deal was in Escanaba, Michigan. And Escanaba is on the upper peninsula of Michigan, and it's a city of about 12,000. So it's not a really big place. So I got a tape, and I have listed here the details on the tape. They said the origination date of the note was April 15th, 2015. Original note was 32.3. The UPB was 31,736, 9.9 interest rate, P&I 281, and they had last paid in September of 2017. It's a single family. It was owner occupied, it's built in the 1900s, and the Zillow fair market value is 72,809.
So this was one that, looking at it, at the time, May of 2018, they were only 8 months behind.
Right,
So
right.
that's not too bad.
No, it's not too bad. So, I first started out really focusing on non-performing because my intention really was to try to work with people to try to get them to reperform. Because if you could get it at a decent price, you get it reperforming, then it's kind of a win-win. It's for the homeowner because, everybody knows life happens. People lose jobs, they have medical issues, whatever. And so if you can kind of get them through that and back on track, you can turn around and sell the note as a performer after you've got it seasoned, and you get a decent return, and everybody's kind of happy.
Yep.
So I started my due diligence, and I found out, well, no, it's not owner occupied. The property was vacant, and the fair market value was somewhere between 26,000 and 31,000, not the 72,000 that was shown on the tape. There was a contract for deed, but it was unrecorded,
Okay.
and the taxes were current, so that was the good news. So,
So it was a CFD,
yeah,
in Michigan. Basically, borrower was 8 months, but the borrower left the property.
right,
And so when you did your due diligence, so you ordered a title report, it looks like, and you also put eyes on the property, which are two important things everybody should do.
exactly,
Good. Okay.
exactly.
Yep.
So I ended up purchasing the note for 12.2. So we had a UPB of about 32, and I got it for 12.2. So I got it for 38% of UPB. I was pretty happy. I thought that was good.
Yeah,
It was
no,
also kind of, huh?
I mean, at that price point, you're probably usually at, anywhere from 30 to 40%. So yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
decent. And when you look at the difference of, between 30 and 38% on something like that, it's not, I mean, you're talking probably less than $1,000, from
right.
that. Yeah. So,
So I estimated that the market price was probably around 26.8, somewhere in there. And I had cranked into my model a foreclosure expense of about $6,300.
hmm which
So
is probably heavy. And, I would, think off the
yeah,
top of my head, but, you're always better to be heavy than you are light.
and I agree. A lot of people are more closer to 5 or
Mhm.
anywhere from 3 to 5.
Yep.
You're right. I tend to be more on the heavy side. I guess I'm, trying to build kind of a worst case scenario, if you will, rather than
Mhm.
it's all roses. So I looked at the exit options. Of course, obviously foreclosure was an exit option. Deed in lieu was an exit option, and reperforming. Well, it's an option. It's vacant, and they hadn't been able to contact the borrower.
Mhm.
So I went through, and there's the profits that I came up with. A foreclosure is about $2,900, 16% ROI. Deed in lieu, 7,300. That was a really good one. If I could get that to happen, that's 51%, or reperforming. That's the best one of them all.
Mhm.
So that's what I was looking at as I was going into this to see, how's it going to play out.
Mhm.
So what happened? Well, I got connected with a good realtor. I was fortunate, and it was luck more than anything,
That's
because
pretty good being out in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, to get a good
it's
realtor. So,
exactly. And this lady, she was fantastic to work with, and she was on top of it. I got the loan boarded with a servicer, and I hired a loss mitigation service to start looking for the borrower. We need to find out what's going on.
so you didn't use the service or use the third party?
I used a third party.
Okay. Yep.
And since it was vacant,
Mhm.
unoccupied, we had the locks changed, and I put forced place insurance on the property.
Smart move there. Good move.
So the realtor then sent me pictures, and there
Mhm.
was a whole lot of stuff still in the house.
Mhm.
It was kind of weird. It said, kind of needs to be cleaned out. So that's something we had to work with. And there was two names, co-borrowers on the note, and they were actually found one. The co-borrowers, it turned out it was a mother and a son, and the son was the one that had lived in the house, and he had passed away. He was single, apparently didn't have any family, and the mother was in a senior living facility.
Okay.
So it was just, I mean, it was just gone.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to get in contact with the mom, and she said, yes, I don't want the house. I've been trying to get in touch with somebody, to get rid of it. She said, she didn't have any need for it, and she was getting stuff. And so we said, hey, how about a deed in lieu? I said, we'll give you $1,500 if you send somebody in to clean it out and, sign all the paperwork that, you release all your claims on it, etc.
Mm-hmm.
She said, you bet, that sounds great. So now we're getting close to a little before October, so we had to winterize the house.
Yep.
That's not something we think a lot about here in Texas, but anyway, up there we had it winterized. And then I get a call from the realtor, said, hey, Joe, I'm sorry, but there's a leak in the house. And we need to kind of get it looked at. She said, I know a roofer. She said, I can have him come over later today and just put a tarp over it to protect it. And so we see what you want to do, and said, yeah. He came over. So he took a look at it. He put a tarp on it, and we could replace part of the roof that was affected, which we did. And so we got that taken care of. And so finally, on September, the end of September, we got it listed for $29,500, and I was offering owner financing as an option.
Yeah, so that was 4 months. That's actually pretty quick, in my mind. When I look at getting from buying a loan, getting it boarded, trying to hunt somebody down, getting the deed in lieu and getting on market in 4 months, I would say I'd call that a win, personally.
Okay. Well, so the problem is the problem is timing, because this is now the early October in a small town in northern Michigan, and the snow hits and nothing much is going on basically from November to the following February. I mean, winter's there and nothing happens.
Everyone's
And
ice
so I get to pay taxes for the prior year. And then finally, I ended up selling it to an investor in June for $21,500.
Now, did you sell it cash or did you finance it to the investor?
At that price, I sold it cash.
Okay.
So what are the numbers? So I purchased it in May 15th of 18. Purchase price was $12,200. We changed the locks, did the skip tracing, forced place insurance, the legal fees for the deed in lieu, the actual deed in lieu payment, servicer fees, winterizing, property management, roof repair, and city fees and taxes, all total $5,300. So my all-in investment in this property was $17,500.
Now it's interesting, because I'll note, some people will be like, oh, deed in lieu is going to be, cheaper than foreclosure, which, usually is. But even with a deed in lieu, I mean, with these properties, and what needs to typically be done, a lot of people will just plug in 5 to 10,000 in costs that you're going to spend, and kind of look at the numbers here, take out the deed in lieu. You still spent close to $4,000 on the property, and you really didn't do anything, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that's something I think a lot of people, especially on these low valued assets, on $100,000 property, of course you have a lot more wiggle room, but on some of these $20,000, $30,000 properties, some people think when they do these calculations, okay, I'm going to have a servicer for 6 months at, $500 in servicing, and, the properties, the BPO came back at 30,000. I'm going to sell it for 30. It's like, no, you're probably going to sell it for 20 to 25, plus you're going to put 5 into it. So, and this is perfect example kind of what you showed here.
Right. So what's the final economics on it? Well, I had $17,510 invested. Sold it for $21,500, but then I had to pay taxes.
Yeah.
the legal fees of the closing,
Hmm.
title insurance, and the commission. So my net proceeds from the sale were 18,475, which means I made $965 on the note, which is a return of 6%.
So, and and again, this was a deed in lieu that you got at 38 cents on the dollar. Uh,
Right.
so, I see sometimes people or sellers wanting 50, 55 cents on the dollar on some of these things, which, in this instance, that would have been roughly, you would have been in for about 17,000 just for your acquisition, plus the 5,000, 22 minus it, you would have lost about $3,000, $4,000 on that deal.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
So that was, it was good. I didn't lose money,
I was gonna say on
but
your first deal, if for
yeah.
me, I look at getting started and buying my first go around. I bought I think like 3 or 4 notes at once, where I bought like a performer, a non-performer, one in BK, and my whole goal was between all of them. If I broke even, I'd be happy.
Hmm.
And it was doing it more for the education, honestly, and because some people will pay tens of thousands of dollars for these educations, whereas hey, look, I'd rather drop 20,000, 30,000 on a few low balance notes and kind of get the
Yeah.
education higher from that perspective.
Right. Right. So that's kind of how the first one went. I felt pretty good about it, other than the return, obviously. But so, kind of what did I learn? Um, well, do your due diligence and make sure you understand the market. Um, I didn't really quite get this one right. I think that I overpriced it, even though, it was um, a lot lower than what it said on the original tape. Um, you need to get a good value of it, and um, that's going to be key. Knowing your service providers and their strengths. I learned a lot about some of the service providers because I hired a loss mitigation firm,
Mm-hmm.
spent 2 months with them, and they never found the co-borrower.
You
But
can say who it is if you want. I have no, it's up to you. But so you can
yeah,
refrain now too.
I, I, uh, but what was funny was that the loan servicer found them.
It's usually the opposite.
I know. Um, so they found them. Uh, so I kind of lost 2 months basically just looking for the borrower, which was this mom that was in a senior living facility.
Mhm.
Um, so once we found them and she agreed to do a deed in lieu, I talked to the servicer. I said, "Hey, can you do the deed in lieu?"
Mhm.
Mistake.
Yeah.
Because
I,
they were going to charge me, I don't know, $350 or something to do it. And 3 weeks after I'd asked them to do it, they came back and asked me for more information. I said, "Excuse me,
I have
what
found
have you been doing?"
nothing against servicers, but anytime it comes to like loan modifications or deed in lieu, it's very difficult because the process just takes so long and you lose so much time. You're better off dealing directly with them, because sometimes the borrower gets the deed in lieu and they don't understand it and they ask a question, and then the servicer takes a week to send you to say, hey, this is a question, are you okay me answering it? And it's like, okay, I could have just picked up my phone and then 5 minutes got it resolved, where you lost 2 weeks right then and there. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so I got so frustrated, I picked up the phone and I called Satelli and Borelli, you
Yeah.
know, and
Mhm.
they said, "Well, yeah, send me the stuff. If it's all there, I'll have it to you tomorrow morning." I went, "What?" Go, "Yeah." And it was like a third the price. I mean, I have a lot of good things to say for those guys. I mean, they've been really good for all of my interactions.
Good.
So I learned time is money. I mean, part of my problem was you said it was pretty quick, and I guess relatively speaking it was, but if I could have had maybe 2 of those months back, I
Hmm.
might have been able to sell it that year. But
Yeah.
because of the location of where it was in Upper Michigan, and we were just starting to go into winter,
Mhm.
you know, my opportunity to sell it diminished significantly. If I could have got it on the market in August, I might
Mhm.
have had a better chance of getting it sold. So it's kind of, time is money. You need to kind of keep things going, and as it takes longer, you're paying the taxes on it till you finally get it sold. So
Well, you're paying the taxes. I mean, if you're mowing, certain places you may have to be mowing the lawn.
oh yeah, I had
It's, that's
city fees for that.
you know, and again, on these lower value, I mean, you pay $12,000, 1,200 bucks in expenses is 10% of your cost.
That's
So
right.
your
Right.
numbers, your returns can fluctuate significantly. That's why on some of these lower dollar ones, sometimes you're better off looking at, you know, it's not as much to return because the difference between 10 and 15% is only 500-600 bucks, which you're better off, I think, looking at the number of, okay, I made this, because I think it's, you know, um, something that's, more relatable.
Hmm. Hmm. So, and then, you know, um, you have to realize or appreciate that if you're dealing with a property in a small town, the time it may take you to sell it's going to be longer than if you're in a bigger metropolitan area.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
but there's just not the quantity of buyers that there are. So um, those were all some good learnings, um, and I think a lot of it really goes back to number one, which is do your due diligence in general. Um,
So,
I can't overemphasize that enough because if you don't get that right, then you're going to have a lot of problems later.
so a few questions I had is, so you bought the loan. Did you keep it with the same servicer that was servicing it originally?
No, I moved it when I bought it. I moved it to Madison, so that I had that window of time
Yep.
transferring it from one to the other.
Yep. So that process in it itself, as your first note and stuff, was there anything as part of that process that you learned? Because for me, when I was trying to, buy my first notes, I found a lot of education, understanding what goes on during the process. I was curious.
Yeah, I had talked to a bunch of people before about it, and it was a little frustrating the time that it takes to get it set up and get it moving. For me, but it wasn't. I mean, other than the time, it was relatively painless, to be honest.
And how long did it take, roughly?
I want to say it was about 45 days.
Okay, yeah. So again, people, because I've bought notes, I've sold notes, and people sometimes are like, a week later, like, okay, is it boarded service? And I'm like, well, it's going to take you, 3, 4, 5 weeks. It's not
Yeah.
happens overnight, from
Right.
that perspective. So, um,
I guess the one thing I didn't appreciate was that, I this is a non-performing note that I'm putting with a servicer.
mhm,
I'm not collecting anything,
mhm,
but yet it's costing me $90 a month for that note.
yeah,
That
mhm,
for
yeah.
them to hold a non-performing note. So, um,
Mhm. So I know you could move it over to client serviced, which is, 40
right,
bucks. Um,
right. I
so
wasn't aware of that at the time, to be honest. But that's one of the learnings. There
yeah,
is that option to go to client
yeah,
service.
it's understanding, the servicers and, sometimes, the strengths and weaknesses of the different servicers. I've got a portfolio and I know you've got other notes and I'm sure you balance between different servicers,
Mm-hmm.
for certain ones because certain assets, that might be performing, especially ones that are on like ACH and, escrow. One servicer's, at 35 bucks a month, another one's at 18 or 18.50. They're half the price. And it's like, okay, the borrower's on ACH, the check coming out every month, why am I paying this extra, basically, it adds, 250 bucks a year, almost in cost when all of a sudden you got 10 notes, that's 2,500 bucks. I mean, you can add up some real money. So that's one thing that is, I think is part of a difference that I'm going to be talking about over next month is the difference between, you know, being a note investor and having a note business, because there is, I think, a big difference in that.
Yeah.
Uh, I
Yeah.
think you're at the point now where you pretty much, got a note business because you've expanded and you've got how many assets you have under your management right now, Joe?
Right now I've got 24.
Okay. So, and are they all performing or a mix?
I have mixed. I actually kind of pivoted towards the end of last year from non-performing to performing. So I want to say, probably got 20 performing and 4 non-performing.
If you could get that damn seller to get you all that collateral, you'd be all set. Well, for this was got some assets from me, and we're laughing about, but I'll tell you, I had a hell of a time because I used a third-party company in getting all the documents to him, and it was at a time like last October, November, where basically this company just fell flat on their face and couldn't get all the documents and stuff, and it's funny because it just popped in my head. The one asset which we converted from a CFD to a note, actually this, the one of the companies, they sent me an email yesterday saying they're going in to record it today. They just needed one more document from me, so that will take care of one of them. And then the other one I got to check on the status of. But uh, from getting documents, and that's probably it's been a good lesson learned for both of us in that sense, because that was probably the at the time for me one the largest sale I've done of assets. I've sold 2-3 assets at a time, but you bought more than a handful from me, and getting that documentation, it was, I'll tell you, it was painful. And I've and it was frustrating on my end, as I know it was on yours, because I'm trying to get you this stuff, and all of a sudden stuff would show up and it was wrong, or you get half of it, and it's like,
Yeah.
geez, Mary and Joseph type thing. So
Well, I mean, I learned a lot too, because to be honest, it helped me put some systems in place, because, before, if I was buying 1 or 2 notes, it's real easy to keep track of,
yep.
you can kind of track it. But then, when you buy 5 or 10 notes, all of a sudden, okay, well, you get a collateral file, you get collateral files for 7 of them.
Yep.
Okay. Now, which ones didn't I get those on? So, I had to set up kind of a check sheet, basically, of all the steps that needed to be done. And I needed to track each one to make sure that, yes, I got the collateral files, I got them set up with the servicer, I've got the new, and I checked the collateral files to see, okay, was the last deed recorded properly, from the seller? And then if all that looks good, okay, now do we have a new one from the guy, the individual, like from you to me? And then, okay, we've got that. Now has it been recorded? Okay, no. And I actually use the service to do the recording. So then I have to send them to the service, and I need to track with those guys to make sure that it gets recorded and to get it back. And so it's a process that I learned I need to kind of set up and structure to make sure I end up with all the right files and stuff done.
And that has been for me, one of my biggest challenges from going from, again, from just being investing in notes. Hey, look, I know, once you get through, okay, it's non-performing, okay, it's in demand, or whatever your process is, managing the note actually becomes second nature and probably your easiest task. It's all the ancillary stuff of, forced place insurance, making sure it's that, or if the borrower gets insurance, canceling it. But the documentation, the recording and stuff, it's funny, I was doing this yesterday. I'm at a call with my company I use, going through all the assets, because I still have probably 10 assets from last year. And again, where are we in April, from last year, that I bought, that still don't have all the proper documentation recorded. And It's been challenging. One of the things I've done to change a little bit is, I signed up for Simplifile, got my an account
Mhm.
there. So I've been recording a lot of stuff I can do so that way I can control it. And then if something comes back rejected, I can go back to the seller and say, hey, fix this versus using the third party who then sends it to me, who I send it to them. And it's kind of like that example of having your servicer do the deed in lieu. They're like the middleman.
Right.
Sometimes using these collateral companies, um, can, be more headache. But in certain instances where it's going to be walk-ins and stuff, I do have them handle it because I have no clue how much, you know, the check is going to
Right.
be for
Right.
the place.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I've tried that once, recording one uh, directly. And I went back and forth like 3 times with the county because um, the check was, what was it? The check was $2 off because the page count was wrong.
mhm,
I had added another page with the stuff documents that I sent back, so the check they needed a different check for the right amount, and
mhm,
all kinds of just little annoying things that
mhm,
had to be done, which is why I started using a
mhm,
servicer to do that recording. So
mhm.
again, got to know your servicers.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, uh, is part of, again, the business. It's knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your team.
Yeah,
Uh, is,
exactly.
it can create a lot more work for you. And it's the difference sometimes of, hey, can I do this alone or do I need to bring on additional staff? Now, for you yourself, you've got 24 assets. Do you do it all yourself or do you have help? I know you've got, somebody, you got your servicers, you got collateral, records collateral, but managing the notes itself, is that just you?
Right now, it's just me, and I've heard people say it before, and I think they're probably right. I think, you probably start to get above 25 notes, something like that. You're probably going to need some help. I have a little bit of help of some people doing some marketing for me,
Yeah.
but as far as actual work on the notes, I do that all myself. All the due diligence, all the run the economics on them, all the
Mhm.
all the details, which I think you get more, you're just going to get totally buried. Do you have someone that helps you, Chris?
So actually, I don't in the sense of, I manage the business, but, from the flip side, I have, a bookkeeper who does all my books. I've got attorneys that handle basically everything I need to handle. I rely on my servicers, but from marketing and managing the day to day for the notes, that is me. And, I'm kind of the, um, that 20 note rule. I'm kind of like out there on my own little island because I've got about 200 right now.
Yeah,
That
I don't know how you do it.
Yeah,
I
and I
don't know
work
how you
full
do it.
time, well. So, but part of it is, for example, I use a system called the Mortgage Office, which is the same system that Madison uses and Lake City Servicing and some of these other servicers, and I can put all the loans in there, and I keep everything updated, and it basically, I'm very organized from my background and what my
Mhm.
full-time career. So from that perspective, I spent all in on software just for that system between the funds and everything, $20,000.
Mhm.
So, but the reality is, you know, like with a fund, you can hire companies that charge you like 1,000 or 1,500 bucks a month to manage a lot of the fund. For me, I'd rather pay for the software because at the end of the day, after a year, basically it pays for itself.
Mhm.
In a 2-year fund, that's just one example where I say I do it myself, but I rely on, like my books. My bookkeeper I love Debbie to death. And, I know a lot of people who do their own books and they'll spend, 2, 3 days a month doing all their books. And for me, it's cheaper to pay her, a few $1,000 per year per entity to, get that done because it allows me more time to, focus on what needs to be focused on. So,
Yeah, I have a bookkeeper. I have an accountant that does my books as well.
mhm,
Um, Her name is Uni Min, and she's with Century Financial.
Okay.
She does a great job. She's really good to work with.
Mhm.
Um, and the nice thing, I got introduced to her from some other note investors. So,
Mhm.
not all accountants have a good sense about notes and
She's
how to
married
record
to,
them and all that kind of stuff. And
she's the one that's married to another investor.
pardon?
Is she the one who's married to another investor?
I don't know.
Okay. There's a one woman who's married to a um, another note investor who does a lot of books, and I can't think of her name right now. And I don't want to mention the name, but that's popped in my head. But
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, her name is Uni,
yep.
Eunie Min.
Hmm.
Um, Nice lady, great to work with. And she's not very expensive, to be honest.
Hmm.
So she takes care of it, and she knows all about notes, and some of the slang that we use, or that's unique to note investing. The deed in lieu, she knows what that is. I mean, she knows all the stuff. So
Yeah.
it makes it real easy. When she starts recording all this stuff. So
So
that's
I've
nice. I've
seen.
been real happy with her.
Yep. So you mentioned marketing. I have seen a lot more marketing from you coming out recently. Is your goal to try and expand business to bring in some investors to participate in some of your deals, or what's your long term?
Yeah, my goal is to do that. Right now, like I told you, I have a number, well, mostly performing notes.
Mhm.
I'm actually looking at selling partials.
That was one of my next questions I was going to ask.
Yes, because I do have those. I'm looking at selling partials
Mhm.
from a strategy perspective.
Mhm.
What I would like to do is to sell the partials, and then with those funds, then be in a position to invest in other notes as things, as the market, I think it's going to deteriorate further, unfortunately. But again, I think it may be an opportunity to help some people out. So if you can get some notes at a decent price, you can try to turn them around, work them, that kind of stuff. And that's what kind of I'm looking at going forward, hoping to do. And I would be able to do that if I sell the partials, and with the partials, people will get a decent return. Um, However, going back to my premise of, I don't want to put anybody's investment in jeopardy. Because of where we are, I've decided to delay selling those partials because I want to make sure that the people that are making those payments now are able to make those for a couple more months. Because with what's going on, a lot of people are out of jobs, etc.
Mhm.
Um, I've only had one not note investor, one borrower
Mhm.
contact me regarding some help with their note.
Mhm.
And I have told my servicers and that if we're contacted, people that have lost their job or whatever that want some help, the policy I've put in place is that um, first, I just want to see something that indicates that they have lost their job or they are out of work. Just something. It doesn't, you know,
Mhm.
have to be a formal notice of dismissal or whatever, but just something to indicate it.
Mhm.
And if so, I'm willing to defer up up to 3 months. I know a lot of people are only doing 2, but I've said I'll defer up to 3 months, and not make it all due at the end of 3 months. While like some people are doing, I'm actually going to move those 3 months to the end of the note.
Okay.
So I've told my 2 servicers, if you get contacted, that's kind of the
Mhm.
plan. And I've only had one so far. And like I said, what I want to do is I want to see those that demonstrate that they're, still able to pay their notes through this time. To me, is going to be a really strong indicator that that would be a good partial to buy. I mean, if it was me and I saw that, I'd say, yeah,
Well,
baby, I'd buy that because they made it through these tough times.
mhm.
You know, doesn't guarantee it 100%, but it looks good. So that's kind of my strategy of what I'm doing going forward with those.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how May plays out because for
Mm-hmm.
me, I've had two borrowers One of them was in bankruptcy, which they reached out to bankruptcy courts, which they had to provide the bankruptcy courts all the information which they provided, which they got a deferment on, which I'm perfectly fine with. The other one I've got was a borrower who had not paid since 2014. So I bought the loan last fall. Um, and the borrower hadn't paid in 5+ years, and we've been trying to work with the borrower in some sense because she wanted to keep the property, but we also kicked off the legal, and then of course with what's going on has slowed that down. But she had been completely non-responsive, and then made a phone call to the servicer asking for what type of forbearance we would be providing for this. And I kind of joked to the servicer, she should go play the lottery because last 5 years she must have seen this coming or something. But so on that one, unfortunately, we didn't provide any type of forbearance. We still have offers on the table with the borrower for providing some type of reinstatement to keep the property, and the borrower keeps saying, "Oh yeah, I'll do it." But the way saying you'll do it versus physically cutting a check are two different things. So, but May, I'm curious to see how May will shake out.
Yeah.
I'm kind of back and forth a little bit because with the stimulus package of people getting $1,200+, a lot of these loans are lower payments that I have of 300, 400, $500 a month. So
Right, right.
hopefully this might be beneficial for them. But on the flip side, there is lots of people who have lost their jobs. So
Yeah, yeah, that's tough. I mean, and you know, some of them are getting unemployment, which helps.
yep.
And so that'll help carry them for a little while too. So
Mhm.
um, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I wish the best for everybody. I don't want anybody to struggle, but unfortunately, I think it's going to happen,
Yep.
or it already is happening. But I did put together one of the slide,
Okay.
and it's got kind of some of the oh shits I've seen.
Okay.
I was looking at a house in Memphis, Tennessee, and I had gotten a bid accepted, and I was doing my due diligence, BPO, all that kind of stuff, and I had the realtor do a drive-by, and I get a phone call, and I didn't get it. There was a message, and it was the realtor saying, "Joe, whatever you do, don't do the deal. Call me back." I'm going, okay. So I called him back, and she said, "Joe, I just went by. There's no house there. It's a vacant lot." I said, "Really?" Because you look at it on Google and you look at it on Zillow, there's a house there, and it's the same house. But when she went by, there was nothing. Just
Two things I'll come on that is always take the satellite view over the street view because satellite view is
yes,
usually up to date. Second thing I'll mention is I've also got the opposite. I've gotten BPOs that say, house needs no work, great condition, and it's worth 100,000, and the house isn't even there. The BPO, the
you're
real,
kidding.
really,
Wow.
and it's actually one in Texas. It was in Houston. It,
Wow.
it was on Cornelia Street in Houston where they said, yeah, 3 bedroom, 1 bath. And it's funny because there was like just a lawn chair sitting in the yard and you can see where the house was. And, they did the BPO and I laughed when I got it. So always check, just don't look at the number on the BPO. Make sure you actually look at some of the photos.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what the realtor said. As soon as I get back to the office, I'll send you the pictures. And yeah, sure enough, I mean, it's just a vacant lot. Another one I had gotten an accepted offer on. This one was in Louisiana. And I said, "Hey, I want to see the servicer notes." That's something I've learned that's very helpful. And the
Yeah.
servicer notes, they actually showed that the servicer had contacted the current note owner, that the city had condemned the property and required it to be demolished. And the servicer sent the note to the note holder saying, "Do you approve of having the city demolish it?" And the notes there said, "Yes, we approve." So it's like, what is going on here? You know, fixing to demolish the house and you're trying to sell the note, you know.
It's, and there's somebody out there, I guarantee you, that probably bought that without asking for the servicer notes.
Probably, you
Yeah.
know.
I've
Uh,
Now, I saw an asset recently that had a BPO of $80,000 on it, and I know an investor bought it. And I had somebody go buy the property, and the property basically, in the servicing notes, it noted that the property had a major water damage, there was mold everywhere, the property was condemned. I had somebody drive by. I mean, the place was a disaster. And they said, it's worth probably about $5,000, because you have to the house and stuff. And lo and behold, somebody bought it, and I was like, I you know somebody's going to take a bath on that because they didn't do their homework.
mhm.
And the reason I know they bought it was on a tape. Then the tape came out a few months later, and it wasn't on there. So I was like, "Oh my God, did somebody actually buy that?" So I Googled it and looked, and there was a deed recorded into another entity who I knew who the person was, and I was
Right.
like,
And then the third one was I put an offer on this property, um, and it was accepted, and I started doing my due diligence, and um, I had to hire an appraiser because I couldn't get a BPO done
Mhm.
um, there, and so I sent an appraiser to do it, and he did that, and then I started pulling the O&E stuff, and I start looking, and the person that's selling the note doesn't own the note. They're not on the CFD.
Mhm.
And so I went back to them and I said, wait a minute, there's a problem here. You know, you're not on the it was a CFD, you're not on the note, on the quitclaim deed. It shows this other fund is. And so they said, yeah. But see, we're buying it from them and we're going to turn around and sell it to you. And so I said, I tell you what, why don't you send me the quitclaim deed showing it, even if it's not recorded, but just showing that it's been sold to you, with the
Yep.
signatures. I can understand, recording
Yeah.
takes time. And so they sent me a quitclaim deed from them to me that's obviously not recorded.
Yeah.
And I said, wait a minute, guys, I need to make sure you
Mhm.
are. And so now they're starting to press me to close on this and wire the funds.
Mhm.
And they want me to wire the funds um, supposedly to a title company. And so I try to call the title company, and most respectable title companies, you're gonna at least get an operator, a receptionist, or somebody, and you can kind of ask some information. I couldn't even get somebody to answer the phone, and so I said, guys, I'm not sending a dime until you're the owner, and so ended up they never could prove. I think it might have been some kind of a deal where they were just going to pass it through a whole bunch of them at once, and I don't know. I just wasn't that. It just didn't sound right to me, so I ended up passing on it, even after I spent all the money on the due diligence.
Yeah, sometimes those are best thing. That's the best thing you could do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Well, no, those are some good, and we've all been through those. So it's good, to hear those as well, and so forth. So, Joe, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
yeah, you can uh, you can reach me at uh, jkennedy at flyingmoose.biz. Instead of com, it's biz.
Okay.
Um, and I have a website, www.flyingmoose.com.
Okay.
And also, if anybody wants to reach out to me by phone, my number's 281-826-4354.
Good. Well, any final thoughts you'd want to add before we wrap up this episode?
No, I can't. I mean, I think that's most of them. I guess the only other final thought is that if you're interested in getting into note investing, I can't. Yeah, I can't reiterate how important it is to try to get connected with other note investors, because what I've found is that you know, while I guess technically we all kind of competed against each other, but really everybody's very helpful. I mean, if there's issues or problems that you're encountering, other note investors have probably already encountered it, and they can help you get through some of those things. And that, you know, I've found it invaluable, you know, the connections and contacts I've made, you know, with you and, you know, people like Cody Cox and Dan Deppen and Paul Cooper and, you know, some different people like that, you know, are really good to kind of have and work with.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% where, you know, if, you know, you need help with something, feel free to ask. You know, the one thing that I'll caution people on is because I see it a lot on Bigger Pockets where somebody says, hey, okay, I want to get into notes. I want to make $20,000 a month. How do I get there? Well, let's, you know, come on, like, let's be realistic, okay?
Yeah.
But if you ask the question of, hey, what are some of the things I should focus on in my business plan because I want to get to $20,000 in the next 5 years? You know, where, you know, what are some of the things I should be looking at? If you ask the intelligent questions and phrase it in that term, you get a lot further than just saying, hey, I want to buy this note. What do you think? It's, you know, you know, if you said, hey, I'm looking in this note in Ohio or the CFD in Ohio. I know there's some quirky rules with CFDs and I've talked to somebody and, you know, what are some of the things that you've, you know, mentioned in the past or something. If you ask it in that, phrase it in that way, you'll go a lot further. You have to
Oh
show
yeah.
some effort first
Right.
before, you know, doing that. And that's where, you know, where I just caution people, but if you do it in that way, people are there to help. So
Exactly. Exactly. It's a good community. Very helpful. People are very helpful,
yeah,
and you know, I've learned a lot just by asking questions, you know, and stuff. So, and thanks a lot to you, Chris. I mean, you've helped me as well. You know, with going through buying these notes from you. It's been a great learning experience.
hopefully they stay performing for you.
I hope so. You know, I'm I'm encouraged so far. You know, it
Good.
seems to be doing well. So we'll see. You know, things happen, but I think it should turn out all right. So yeah, you know, a big shout out to you and all the help from you. You know, it's been good.
Good. Well, I'm going to wrap up this episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. Joe, thanks for joining us today. And for people, make sure to check us out on YouTube at Seveney Investments, our Facebook group, Notes and Bolts from the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. And thank you all for listening. Have a good day,
Thanks
everybody.
for having me, Chris. Take care.